In Sedona, Arizona, people climb red rocks before dawn, press their palms to warm sandstone, and swear the desert is alive. They call it a vortex mystery now. They say something rises through the stone at Bell Rock, something pulls tears out of people at Cathedral Rock, something waits in Boynton Canyon and Airport Mesa like a current moving just under the skin of the earth. Others say it is nonsense, suggestion, heat, altitude, silence, branding. Yet millions keep coming to this one small town in the Arizona desert to ask the same question: what is really hidden here? Bell Rock, Cathedral Rock, Boynton Canyon, Airport Mesa, four famous sites, four red monuments, four places where strangers close their eyes in the wind and report the same impossible things: tingling hands, sudden grief, inexplicable peace, the unnerving sensation that the land is looking back at them. Believers say Sedona sits on one of the planet's great energy centers, a place where the Earth thins and the veil between worlds loosens. Maps have been printed, tours have been sold, entire lives have been rearranged around that conviction. Skeptics answer with one cold fact: no instrument has ever measured a Sedona vortex. No published study has found the hidden force the brochures promise. And still, the stories keep multiplying. Still, the desert keeps changing people. So the real mystery is not whether visitors feel something. They do. The real mystery is why this landscape keeps producing the feeling, why ancient people marked these canyons long before the word vortex existed, and why a modern tourism industry built on a disputed idea somehow keeps delivering experiences its critics cannot fully explain away. That is where the suspense begins. Not with aliens, not with buried gold, not with some secret machine humming under the chapel. The deeper question is older and harder. What happens when a landscape is so vast, so silent, and so saturated with erased history that human beings start calling their own transformation an external force? Older than the brochures, older than the Jeep tours, older than the crystal shops, there is another story inside these rocks. A story of vanished seas, cliff dwellings, handprints, removals, reinventions, and one word that changed the town forever, because the official Sedona Vortex story is shockingly young. The branded version of the mystery, the named sites, the energy maps, the masculine and feminine flows, is younger than the interstate highway system. It belongs to the late 20th century. It has a birthday. It has authors. It has a market. Call that word invented if you want. Call the maps commercial. Call the entire industry a beautiful misunderstanding. Even then, one stubborn fact remains. The feeling people report in these red rocks is older than the word used to sell it. Tonight we are going to pull on that contradiction slowly. We are going to ask why Sedona became America's most famous vortex town. What was here before the language of energy entered the valley? What science can and cannot explain, and what might still be hidden in plain sight beneath all the postcards, all the myths, and all the polished spiritual marketing. No conspiracy is required for this story to become strange. No paranormal proof is required for it to become powerful. This is not a sprint into wild speculation. It is a long, slow walk through geology, archaeology, memory, psychology, money, beauty, and the stubborn human habit of feeling that certain places know more about us than we know about ourselves. American mysteries have a special texture. In older parts of the world, the ruins are obvious. They rise from the ground and announce themselves. Here, many of the most important things are half-buried, misnamed, paved over, turned into attractions, or remembered only in fragments. Sedona is one of those places where the missing story is almost more visible than the official one. Stand in the valley at sunset and the problem becomes physical. The cliffs glow as if lit from behind. The towers hold the last light longer than seems fair. The silence thickens. People begin speaking softly for reasons they cannot explain. A beautiful place should not be evidence of anything, and yet beauty this concentrated makes people suspicious. It feels like a clue. If the main topic of tonight's walk is Sedona's vortex mystery, then the first answer is simple. Yes, the mystery is real. Not because a meter confirms it, not because a guru certifies it. The mystery is real because this desert keeps producing the same testimony across decades, across beliefs, across cultures. Something happens here. The only real fight is over what to call it. Conch is one possible name. Awi is another. Grief, release, memory, suggestion, sacred geography, emotional expectancy, deep time, land-based ceremony, each explains part of the effect, and none of them explains the whole valley. That is why the story lasts. That is why the tourists return. That is why the skeptics keep watching. Keep that question close. The valley will answer it in different languages as we go: geology, archaeology, memory, silence, longing, and none of those languages will quite settle it. That, too, is part of the mystery now. Let us begin at the beginning, which is not where you think it is. Sedona's story does not begin with the 1902 post office, or the 1980s birth of the word vortex, or even the last ice age, when the first people walked down from the north and looked out over a land they did not yet have a name for. The beginning of Sedona is a sea. Close your eyes and try to see it, because it takes some imagination. 400 million years ago, give or take a few laps of the slow continental wheel, this place where you are lying right now, this arid red kingdom of mesas and buttes, was underwater. Warm, shallow, gray-green water, the color of ancient soup, stretching in every direction under a sky that had never seen a bird. There were no birds yet anywhere. There were no flowers. There were no people, no towns, no maps, no names. There was only the sea and the slow rain of sediment falling through it, grain by grain, century by century, the patient accumulation of everything that had ever lived and died in that water. The shells, the bones, the calcium dust of a million small lives, settling, compacting, becoming stone. That is the first secret of the red rocks. They are made of death, beautifully organized. Geologists call the red cliffs around Sedona by a formal name, the Schnebly Hill Formation. It is a dark red sandstone, anywhere from 800 to 1,000 feet thick, and it is the very substance of the famous skyline, the body of every postcard, the flesh of Cathedral Rock and Bell Rock and the 1,000 towers and spires that catch the sunset and set it on fire. It was laid down not in one flood, but in a long series of them, over millions of years, in an environment that shifted back and forth between shallow sea and coastal desert, between tide and dune, between the green whisper of water and the red roar of wind. Each layer is a chapter. Each band of color is a season of the ancient earth, and if you know how to read them, the cliffs tell you the whole biography of a vanished continent, page by page, in a language made of iron. No brush painted the red. The rock is red the way a nail left out in the rain turns red. Iron. The sandstone is stained with iron oxide, which is to say rust, which is to say the slow oxidation of minerals that were already old when the dinosaurs were new. The color that draws millions of people to this valley, the color that has launched 1,000 healing sessions and 1,000,000 photographs, is literally the color of the earth breathing, the color of metal surrendering to oxygen, molecule by molecule, eon by eon. We do not usually think of rust as sacred. That is one of the first gifts this place offers, the reminder that the sacred and the chemical are not enemies. They are the same event seen from two different distances. Above the red sandstone, if you climb, the story changes. The Schnebly Hill Formation gives way to the Coconino Sandstone, paler, harder, the fossilized dunes of a great desert that once stretched across this region, ripples frozen into stone, the imprints of ancient sandstorms that blew 100 million years before the first mammal took its first breath. And below it all, beneath the whole red tower, runs the deeper basement, the schist and granite, the black bones of the continent, 2 billion years old, the oldest things in the valley, quietly holding everything up. 2 billion years. The human mind cannot really hold a number like that. It is the difference between a single page and the entire Library of Congress, repeated 10,000 times. Here is what you notice when you stand at the edge of this geology and let it sink in. The town of Sedona, population somewhere around 10,000, has existed for just over a century. The vortex industry has existed for less than 50 years. Homo sapiens, the species that built the town and named the vortices, has walked the earth for roughly 300,000 years, a blink that barely registers in the ledger of the rocks. And this stone, this particular red stone, was old before the continents finished arranging themselves into the shapes we recognize on maps today. It has been here, patient, waiting, through every empire, every revolution, every war, every invention, every quiet human night exactly like this one. It was here before the first person ever stood on it and wondered. It will be here, almost certainly. After the last person stops wondering, the red rocks are patient. That is the phrase to hold on to. We will come back to it. And if this is the kind of slow-burning mystery you want more of, consider subscribing. Then leave a comment with your current city and the time where you are. I always love seeing how many corners of the world are listening to the same story in the dark. But rocks, patient as they are not the whole story. Because at some point, and this is where the story begins to get complicated, people arrived. And the people did something that rocks cannot do. They looked at the stone and they saw meaning in it. They arranged their lives around it. They buried their dead facing it. They carved their dreams onto it. And some of them, in ways we are only beginning to understand, may have felt exactly what the visitors of today claim to feel, standing on that same ground in the same wind, under the same enormous star-thick sky. Which raises the question the tidy story never answers. Who were they, and what did they know? To answer that, we have to go back before the name, before Sedona, before the post office, before the cowboys and the movies and the crystals. We have to walk back to the time when this valley had no name at all, and the people who lived in it had no reason to believe they would ever need one. And the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. To understand what is hidden in this desert, you have to ask who was here before the word existed for what they felt. Archaeologists will tell you that humans have been in this part of the world for a very long time. Not as long as the rocks, of course. Nothing is as long as the rocks. But long enough that the town of Sedona, with its century of post office boxes and its 50 years of vortex maps, is to this landscape what a butterfly is to the tree it lands on for a single breath. Those first travelers came into the Americas during the last ice age, walking down through a world that no longer exists, following herds across land that is now under the sea. Generations later, their descendants spread out across a continent like ink spreading in water, and some of them eventually found their way to this red country, to the canyons and the seeps and the places where the cliffs offered shelter and the streams offered life. They did not build the kind of cities we are used to. They built something better, something that confuses us more. They built places that fit into the stone the way water fits into a riverbed. If you drive out of Sedona today and wind down through the Verde Valley, past the gas stations and the mobile home parks and the fields of red dust, you will come to a place the National Park Service calls Montezuma Castle. Do not let the name fool you. It is not a castle. It was never a castle. And Montezuma, the Aztec emperor, the man with the feather crown who lived 1,000 miles to the south in a city of stone and canals, Montezuma never saw it, never heard of it, never came anywhere near it. The name is a mistake, a misunderstanding, a layer of wrong story laid over a true one, the way a tourist's penciled note can cover the inscription beneath it. The people who actually built this place are called the Sinagua by the archaeologists, and the word itself is another kind of mistake, a Spanish word meaning without water, given because the people who first described the ruins could not understand how anyone could live in such dry country. They lived in it fine. They lived in it for 800 years. Around the year 1000 of the Common Era, the Sinagua stopped living in scattered pit houses and began building towns. They built them into the cliff faces, in the natural caves and alcoves that pock the limestone and sandstone high above the valley floor. In rooms you can still see today, 5 stories up, almost 9 centuries after the last hands laid the last stone. At Montezuma Castle, the walls rise in smooth plains of mud plaster and river stone, tucked under a great natural overhang that shields them from rain and sun, so well made that they still stand, while the empires that tried to destroy such things have turned to dust. You look up at those rooms and you feel something strange. You feel that the building is not resting on the cliff. The building is the cliff. Someone, 1,000 years ago, looked at a wall of red stone and saw where the rooms should go, the way a sculptor looks at a block and sees the shape inside it. They did not impose themselves on the land. They joined it, and because they joined it, what they made has outlasted almost everything we build today. This is not incidental beauty. This is the first great lesson this landscape teaches. If you are willing to lie still long enough to hear it, the people who lived here did not experience the red rocks the way we do. They did not come to the rocks as visitors. The rocks were not scenery to them. The rocks were their walls, their ceilings, their calendar, their temple, their pantry, their map, their myth. The boundary between the human and the stone was thin in this country, and the people who lived here kept it thin on purpose, the way you keep a door unlocked between rooms you love. All around Sedona, if you know where to look, the evidence of this thinness is still present. There are the cliff dwellings tucked into the canyons outside town, places with old names, Palatki, Honanki, where the walls still show the dark fingerprints of smoke from fires that went out 700 years ago, and where the rock faces are covered with images, spirals, handprints, animals, human figures, symbols that no one living can fully read. Archaeologists call them petroglyphs and pictographs, chipped and painted marks on stone. The people who made them would have called them something more ordinary and more profound. They would have called them memory. They would have called them the land speaking to itself. No one living can say what the spiral meant to the hands that carved it. We can guess. We can feel the shape of the guess in our own bodies because the spiral is one of those forms that seems to speak a language older than words. The whirl of water going down a drain, the curl of a fern before it opens, the turning of the galaxy above the desert on a clear night. A spiral is a vortex drawn by a hand that never heard the word. A spiral is the oldest image of motion in stillness, and there are spirals cut into the red country that predate every vortex map ever printed by a margin that would embarrass us if we let it. Ceremonies went with them, and songs went with them. What remains known, the people of this valley buried their dead facing certain rocks, oriented their rooms towards certain peaks, marked certain springs and certain caves and certain flat places with the patient labor of generations. We know the land was read like a text, and the text was alive, and we know that around the beginning of the 1500s, the cliff houses went quiet. Nobody is certain why. The climate was turning. The droughts that cycle through this country like a slow heartbeat had come again, worse than before. The old ones moved, as they had always moved, following the water and the answers, folding their towns into other towns, their blood into other blood, their stories into the stories of the peoples who came after them. The Sinagua, the archaeologists say, dispersed, were absorbed, moved south and east, became part of the great river of people who would one day be called by other names. The walls they left behind stood empty, patient, waiting, holding the dark and the dust and the memory of firelight. Then other people came into the red country, the Yavapai, the Apache, hunters and gatherers who knew this land the way you know your own hand, who followed the game trails and the water courses, who made their camps in the same caves, who added their own marks to the same stone walls, layer over layer, story over story, until the rock faces became a palimpsest of the human heart. The rock art they left dates from the 1400s down to the 1870s, and then, abruptly, it stops. The marks on the stone end the way a sentence ends when the writer is pulled away from the desk. Because in the 1870s, the world came for this valley. It came in the form of the railroad first, and then the ranchers, and then the cavalry, and then the maps, and then the fences, and then the orders. The Yavapai and the Apache, who had lived in the Red Country as long as the Red Country had a memory of people, were rounded up and marched away to reservations, their land taken, their names changed, their children schooled in the forgetting of who they were. The story of the removal of the native peoples of the Verde Valley is a long one, and it is not a heroic one, and it is rarely told in the places where the tourists buy their crystals and their vortex maps, because the truth of it is inconvenient in the way that all truths about how a country acquires its beauty spots are inconvenient. This country we love, this small red bowl of the sacred, was emptied of its first inhabitants by policy, by force, by the slow grinding of one way of life against another. The destruction of indigenous knowledge is an epistemological catastrophe. That is a large phrase for a large wound, but it means something specific here. It means the people who knew these rocks best were removed before anyone thought to write down what they knew. It means the songs that went with the spirals, the stories that explained why this spring was holy and that peak was watched, the ceremonies that kept the relationship between the people and the land alive and reciprocal. Most of it is gone, scattered, silenced, remembered only in fragments that the descendants of those peoples have carried in their mouths and their hearts through generations of forced assimilation and deliberate erasure. It means, when the New Age arrived in this valley 100 years later, looking for ancient wisdom, it found a landscape emptied of its living teachers, and it filled the silence with its own inventions. Not always badly, sometimes beautifully, but the silence had been made. The silence was not natural. The silence was made by policy. This is the thing almost nobody says out loud in Sedona, because it is not comfortable and it is not marketable. The word vortex was invented less than 50 years ago, but the feeling it names is as old as the handprints on the canyon walls. The difference is that the handprints were made by people who lived in relationship with this land, who gave to it as they took from it, who understood themselves as part of it. The vortex industry sells the feeling and the land separately, and that separation, more than any geology or any energy field, is the strangest thing hidden in this desert. A handprint on a wall, a spiral carved in stone, a tour bus idling at a trailhead, its passengers unbuckling their seatbelts to go and feel what the old ones never needed to name, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before the naming, before the industry, before the word, there is the question of what the land itself is doing, what the stone is made of, why this particular valley and not the next one, why here. Because the believers will tell you the energy is real, and the skeptics will tell you it is suggestion, and it is possible that both of them are standing on ground that knows something neither of them has asked. The people are gone, the rocks are not, and the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. Now we come to the ground itself. There is a phrase people use about Sedona, and you will hear it everywhere, from the shuttle drivers to the healers to the man selling handmade dream catchers at the trailhead. They say, the earth is thin here. The veil is thin. The membrane between this world and the other world is stretched so fine in this valley that you can almost see through it. It is a beautiful phrase. It is also, if you know what to listen for, a geological description wearing spiritual clothing. Then where? Let us look at what is actually under this town. The first thing to understand is that Sedona does not sit on flat ground. It sits on the edge of a continental shelf of stone. To the north and east, beyond the road that climbs out of the valley toward Flagstaff, the land rises onto the great uplifted platform geologists call the Colorado Plateau, a block of the Earth's crust almost the size of France that has been lifted, tilted and carved over tens of millions of years. The southern edge of that plateau shears off in an enormous cliff line called the Mogollon Rim, an escarpment of layered rock that runs for hundreds of miles across Arizona like a scar. And Sedona sits precisely at the foot of that rim, in the place where the high country falls away and the desert begins, in the hinge between two worlds of elevation, two worlds of climate, two worlds of vegetation, two worlds of feeling. Drive 20 minutes out of town and the scale of this becomes physical. The road climbs, the vegetation changes, the air cools, the pines close in, and suddenly you understand that the red rocks you were standing among are the broken edge of an enormous tableland, the exposed face of a 1,000-foot layer cake of ancient sediment. The famous red towers, Cathedral Rock, Bell Rock, the spires of Courthouse Butte are not mountains in the ordinary sense. They are remnants, the leftovers of erosion, the parts of the plateau that the water and the wind have not yet carried away. They are the bones of a landscape that is still being carved. Water does the carving, and the tool is a creek. Oak Creek, which runs out of the mountains to the north and through the canyon that bears its name, has spent millions of years cutting down through the sandstone, deepening its channel foot by foot, century by century, patient as a heartbeat. Every flood that has ever come down that canyon, every spring melt, every flash storm, has taken another thin layer of the land and carried it downstream toward the Verde River and the Salt River and the Colorado, and at last to the sea that once covered this whole country. The canyon that frames the approach to Sedona is a wound, if you like, a cut, a slow and beautiful surgery performed by water on stone, and the red rocks you see are the exposed anatomy of the earth, the muscles and bones of the planet laid bare. Now, the layers themselves. Geologists give them names, and the names are worth knowing the way you know the names of streets in a city you love. At the very bottom, far beneath everything, lie the oldest rocks in the valley, dark schists and granites nearly 2 billion years old, the basement of the continent, the deep foundation that has been there since long before life crawled out of the sea. Above them, one after another, the younger layers, the ancient sediments of seas and rivers and deserts, each one a former world, each one capped and sealed by the one above it, until you reach the formation that gives this valley its famous face. The Schnebly Hill Formation, the geologists call it, a dark red sandstone 800 to 1,000 feet thick, laid down in the slow alternation of shallow sea and coastal dune, stained red by the iron it carries. And it is this single thick slab of rust-colored stone, this one chapter of the Earth's autobiography, that forms the spires and mesas and buttes in every photograph you have ever seen of this place. Above the red sandstone rises the paler Coconino sandstone, the fossilized dunes of an ancient desert, its cross-bedded layers slanting like the frozen ripples of a wind that stopped blowing 250 million years ago. Stop for a moment and feel the weight of that sequence, because it is doing something to you, whether you know it or not. You are standing right now in this small town on a stack of vanished worlds. Every color band on the cliffs is a different time, a different climate, a different arrangement of life and death. The red is not a color. The red is 1,800 feet of compressed time, exposed. When you look at Cathedral rock glowing at sunset, you are looking at the inside of the earth. The same substance that underlies whole provinces, the same page of the book, and the feeling that this stirs in you, the vertigo of time, the sense that you are very small and very late and very temporary, that feeling is not a vortex. But it is real. It is one of the most real things a human being can feel. AWE is real. And this landscape is engineered by 400 million years of indifferent geology to produce it. Here is where the honest science must speak, and it must speak kindly but clearly because it is part of the truth of this place, and the truth should not be withheld from you. Scientists have asked the obvious question. If there is an energy field at the vortex sites, a measurable physical thing, an anomaly in the magnetic field, an emission of radiation, a current in the ground, then it should show up on instruments. The instruments have been carried to the sites. Geologists and geophysicists have walked the same trails, stood on the same rocks, with magnetometers and electrometers and every kind of sensor the toolbox of physics offers, and the needles do not move. No published study has ever found a measurable energy anomaly at any Sedona vortex site that differs from the ordinary baseline of the Earth's magnetic field, which, like everywhere on this planet, is everywhere present and everywhere indistinguishable from background. The geomagnetic field is real, of course. It is an actual physical phenomenon, the great invisible shield generated deep in the Earth's molten core, and its strength and direction vary slightly from place to place, which is why compasses behave differently at different latitudes. But the variations are tiny, they are global, they are not concentrated under Cathedral rock, and they are not the tingling in your hands. Geologists have said so, plainly, for decades, and the crystal shops have kept selling crystals, and the tour guides have kept guiding, and the sun has kept setting the rocks on fire every evening, because the sunset does not require the permission of the magnetometer. Does that settle it? Does that make the vortex a delusion? Here is the thing I want you to notice, and it is the heart of this whole long walk. The fact that the field is not in the ground does not mean the feeling is not in you. And the feeling in you, the tears that come unbidden at the top of Airport Mesa, the sudden silence that falls on a group of strangers at Cathedral Rock, the inexplicable peace at the base of Bell Rock, the sense of being held, being seen, being welcomed that people describe over and over in almost the same words from all over the world. That feeling is not nothing. It is measurable. It is reproducible. It is one of the most studied phenomena in modern psychology, and it has a name, and the name is not vortex. The name is awe. Psychologists who study awe will tell you that it is the emotion we feel in the presence of something vast and something that defies our existing mental models of the world. A thunderstorm, a cathedral ceiling, a newborn child, a night sky, or a red rock cliff 1,000 feet tall that appears in the low light of evening to be burning. They will tell you that awe has a specific physiology. It slows the heart. It stills the voice. It opens the chest. It produces the sensation of time slowing down. It shrinks the sense of the self, that constant inner narrator, and replaces it for a moment with the sense of being part of something larger. The very description, in clinical language, of what thousands of Sedona visitors report as the vortex experience, the feeling of the small self dissolving, the boundaries dropping, the connection flooding in. They will tell you that awe is good for you, that it reduces inflammation, that it makes people more generous and more patient and more kind, that regular doses of it measurably improve mental health, and that modern life, with its screens and its schedules and its walls, is engineered to keep us from feeling it. which is exactly why we are willing to drive 1,000 miles and pay for a hotel room and stand in the wind on a flat rock with our eyes closed in order to feel it for 20 minutes. Believers say the rocks emit energy. The skeptics say it is all in your head. And the truth, the one that sits underneath both stories like the basement rocks underneath the town, is stranger and more beautiful than either of them. The rocks do not emit anything, but the rocks are the doorway through which the most real thing in the human nervous system walks into the room. The feeling is not in the ground. It is in you. It was always in you. The place just gives it permission to come out. That is why the same thing happens in so many other places on Earth that have been called sacred by so many different peoples. The mountains of the Andes, the temples of Bali, the gorges of the Indus, the red center of Australia, the kivas of the Southwest, the great cathedrals of Europe. Humans have always built and chosen their places of power, at the meeting point of vastness and silence, at the hinge where the world becomes bigger than the self, because the machinery of awe is ancient and it is universal and it is looking for exactly this kind of door. Sedona is a door. It is not the only door, but it is a very, very good one. There is one more piece of the geology that deserves mention because it is the favorite piece, the piece the tour guides and the New Age literature will bring up sooner or later, and it is true, and it is also not what they say it is. Sedona's granite, like granite everywhere, contains quartz. The New Age literature will tell you that quartz crystals vibrate, that they store and transmit energy, that the piezoelectric properties of quartz under pressure generate measurable electrical fields, and therefore the quartz-rich ground of Sedona, stressed and strained along the faults that run through this region, is generating the vortex energy. The science here is a string of true facts threaded into an untrue conclusion. Yes, quartz has piezoelectric properties. Yes, stress quartz crystals in the earth do produce tiny electrical charges during earthquakes, an effect real geologists have measured. Yes, there are faults in the region, including the Oak Creek fault system that runs through the valley, but the tiny, transient earthquake-related voltages produced by deep crustal stresses have nothing to do with a calm tingling on a sunny afternoon at Bell Rock. No instrument has ever detected them at any vortex site, and the whole chain of reasoning, when you pull it, unravels in your hand the way the rest of the story does. The science is real, the leap is not, and the leap is where the mystery lives. We have walked now from the sea that covered this country to the people who carved their spirals into its walls to the stone itself, and we have found that the stone is old, old beyond telling, and that the feeling it produces is real, real beyond dispute, and that the connection between them is not what either the believers or the skeptics say it is. The connection is weirder. The connection passes through the human heart. And the human heart, as the scientists who study awe will tell you, is the most sensitive instrument at any vortex site. It is the only instrument that has ever measured anything there. It has measured it millions of times. But the story does not end with the psychology, because there is one more character who has not yet entered the room, and that character changed everything. The word. Someone had to say the word out loud, in a specific time and place, and once it was said, the valley was never the same again. Before we meet them, though, this seems like a good place to pause and to ask you for something small. If you have come this far with me, if you are lying there in the dark, with the red rocks glowing behind your eyes, I would like to know that you are real, that I am not speaking into an empty void. It takes 10 seconds. In the comments, tell me where you are right now and what time it is. The city, the hour, the reason you are awake. I read every single comment, and I saved the ones where people say the same thing. I don't know why I'm crying. I don't know why I had to come here. You are not the only one who has ever felt that. That is why we are here together, all of us, in the dark, in 100 cities, listening to the same stones. And if you would like a quiet voice to come back to, night after night, consider subscribing. It costs nothing, it is the only fuel this channel runs on, and it means that on the nights when the world is too loud and you need something to hold on to, I will be here. A bookmark, a doorway, a small red rock in the dark, waiting for you. The word is coming. The man who spoke it is closer than you think. And the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. Every haunting has a beginning, every legend has a date, and the legend of the Sedona Vortex, for all its robes of ancient mystery, was born in a specific place and time, among specific people, in a cultural moment that you can hold in your hand and examine the way you would examine a coin. The year was 1981. The place was a bookstore, and the writer was a man named Pete A. Sanders Jr., an MIT honors graduate, of all things, an engineer by training, a man whose resume belonged in one world and whose obsession belonged in another. He had come to Sedona, as so many had, and he had felt something and he had begun to study it, and in 1981 he published a small book with a strange title. The book was called Scientific Vortex Information. And inside it, Sanders used a word to describe the places in the landscape where he believed the Earth's energy was concentrated, where meditative experiences seemed to come more easily, where people reported changes in their awareness. The word was vortex. He had picked it, by his own account, a couple of years earlier, around 1979, to describe these sites. Now, pause here, because the weight of this moment is easy to miss. For the entire history of the valley, going back to the first handprints on the canyon walls, the people who lived here had felt what this landscape could do to the human nervous system. They had marked the places where it happened. They had built their lives around those places. But they had never needed a single portable word for the phenomenon, because the phenomenon was not separate from the land. It was the land. The word vortex arrived. When the land became a commodity, when the experience needed to be labeled in order to be sold, when visitors from a culture of maps and bullet points needed a name for something that had previously been as indistinguishable from the landscape as the light in it. The word is not the discovery. The word is the translation. And translations, as everyone who has ever loved a poem in two languages knows, are where the truth both arrives and escapes. Pete Sanders was not alone. In 1980, a psychic and channeler named Paige Bryant released an audio recording with a striking title, The Earth Changes Survival Handbook, a message she said had been given to her by a spiritual being named Albion, a voice from the unseen world, and in that recording the word vortex was used again, this time in an explicitly spiritual register, describing the Earth's energy centers, the places where the planet's consciousness was most accessible, and naming this valley as one of them. 2 names, 2 years, 2 books, 2 traditions, the engineer and the channeler, the measure and the trance, and between them, a word was set loose in the world like a seed thrown into a canyon wind. It might have blown away. It did not, because the moment was waiting for it. To understand why that word, in that valley, at that moment became one of the most successful brands in the history of American spirituality, you have to understand what was happening in the country around it. The late 1970s and early 1980s were a strange and fertile time in American life. The old certainties had been worn thin. The institutions that had once supplied meaning, the church, the state, the corporation, the neighborhood, were all visible in their failures. Vietnam had happened. Watergate had happened. The atomic age had happened. And the clock was still there on the cover of the magazine, ticking. And in the space left by the retreat of the old answers, a great and disorganized hunger had moved in. The hunger for direct experience of the sacred, unmediated by institutions, unedited by authority. Millions of Americans were reading books about past lives and channeling and crystals and cosmic cycles. They were attending workshops where they were encouraged to feel their feelings, which sounds quaint now, but was, at the time, a radical act. They were looking for places on the map where the other world felt close, and they were willing to travel. Sedona, in those years, was perfectly positioned to receive them. It had a physical beauty so concentrated that it produced a kind of shock in people who visited it for the first time. It had a remnant population of artists and seekers and gentle eccentrics who had been drifting to the red rocks since the 1950s, drawn by the light and the silence and the cheap land. It had the remains of actual ancient peoples whose cliff dwellings and rock art lent the whole valley an air of authentic pre-Columbian mystery, of wisdom older than the nation itself. And now, in the early 1980s, it had a word. It had the vortex. It had a name for the thing that people were already feeling, which is the most powerful possession a place can have. Celestial events aligned in the summer of 1987, and the fire took, that August, a wave of spiritual tourism washed over the planet and permanently changed the character of certain landscapes. It was called the Harmonic Convergence, a date proposed by the artist and writer Jose Arguelles, who had published his beliefs in a book called The Mayan Factor, arguing that the ancient Maya had mapped great cycles of time, that a pivotal shift was coming, and that on August 16th and 17th of 1987 humanity would have a moment of collective spiritual alignment, a chance to change the direction of the world. The proposal swept through the networks of the New Age like wildfire through dry grass. Thousands upon thousands of people, the estimates range from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, traveled to sacred sites around the globe, to the pyramids, to Machu Picchu, to Glastonbury Tor, to the Great Lakes, to the mountains of Peru, and to Sedona, Arizona, where the red rocks were already famous and the word vortex was already in circulation. The seekers came in a river. They came to Bell Rock and Boynton Canyon and Airport Mesa. They came with drums and crystals and meditations planned out on paper. They sat in circles on the sandstone and held hands and faced the dawn. The local newspapers sent photographers. The world looked at the red rocks and saw a bowl of people glowing with the conviction that something was beginning. And whether or not anything shifted in the cosmos on those 2 August days, something shifted in the history of this town. Sedona had become overnight a destination for a kind of pilgrimage America had not seen before. Not religious exactly, not touristic exactly, but something new in between, a tourism of the soul, a commerce of the sacred, a business built on the oldest human longing there is. After 1987, the growth was not a trickle. It was a flood. The word spread through the culture along every channel that existed. There were books now, guides to the vortexes, maps painstakingly drawn of the energy sites, memoirs of transformation in the red rocks. There were workshops, meditation intensives, vision quests, crystal healing seminars, past life regression sessions held in rooms with a view of Cathedral Rock. There were businesses, vortex tours with jeeps and vortex tours on foot, vortex jewelry and vortex workshops and vortex certification programs, until the word itself began to loosen its grip on meaning and float free, the way words do when they are used too much, and people started applying it to everything from a good cup of coffee to a particularly scenic rest stop. There were celebrities. The consciousness boom of the 1980s had its stars, and many of them made their way to the Red Rocks, and some of them wrote about it, and every mention poured another gallon of fuel on the fire. There were musicians, artists, authors, healers, all of them converging on this small town in the high desert of Arizona until Sedona became, in the space of a decade, one of the most famous spiritual destinations on the planet, a kind of New Age Jerusalem built of rust-colored sandstone. Was any of this a con? Was the entire phenomenon a fabrication, a cynical invention, a commodity resting on a lovely lie? Ask Pete Sanders, and he would tell you no. He spent decades insisting that the vortexes were real, that he had experienced them, that thousands of people had experienced them, that there was a science to it, even if the instruments had not caught up yet. He was an engineer. He believed in measurement. He wanted the measurements to arrive. Ask Paige Bryant, and she would tell you no. She was a channel, she was in relationship with the unseen, and for her, the vortexes were a meeting place with something real, whatever you chose to call it. Ask the healers and the guides and the hundreds of thousands of visitors, and almost all of them would tell you the same thing. What happened to them in the Red Rocks was real. It happened. It changed them. It cannot be argued away. Here is the historical irony that I want to leave you with at the end of this chapter, because it is the kind of irony the old ones would have recognized immediately. Whether or not the earth energy is physically real, the word vortex has been real from the moment it was spoken. Real in its effects, real in its power to move bodies across continents, to change the economies of valleys, to open experiences in millions of nervous systems, to create community, to create meaning, to create beauty. A word that can do all that is not a lie. A lie does not have that kind of generative power. A word is a kind of technology, no less real than a wheel or a lens, and the technology of the vortex has worked, has produced its intended effect, millions and millions of times. The skeptics are right that no instrument has measured it, and yet it has measured itself in the only way that matters for a human life. In the stories people tell afterward, in the decisions they make, in the peace they carry home, which brings us at last to the places themselves. Because the word did not create the feeling, the word only named it, And the places, the 4 great sites that everyone knows, plus the 40 lesser sites that the maps mark in smaller type. The places were doing what they do long before anyone called them anything. Let us go to them now, one by one, in the low light of the afternoon, when the shadows grow long and the stone begins to glow from within, the way it has always glowed. And the visitors stand on the flat rocks with their eyes closed and their hands open, and the skeptics stand a little apart, pretending not to watch, and both of them are feeling the same wind. This is the part of the walk I have been saving for you. If you have drifted off somewhere along the way, let the next lines bring you back gently. We are going to visit the places where the veil is said to be thinnest, and you do not need to believe anything to come along. Just listening is enough. Just being here is enough. In a little while, we will climb back down from the rocks and ask the harder questions about the skeptics and the believers, about the money and the meaning, about whether a place can be sacred and sold at the same time. But first, the rocks themselves, patient as always, waiting as always, the way they waited for the hands that carved the spirals, the way they wait for you. And the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. 4 names appear on every map, and every map agrees on them. 4 places where the word vortex settles heaviest, where the tour buses stop, where the visitors stand with their eyes closed and their palms open. There are more than 4, if you trust the smaller maps. Some say a dozen, some say 40, some say the whole valley is a vortex, and the named sites are only the places where it surfaces like a whale breaking water. But 4 have become the canon, the pilgrimage circuit, the stations of the cross for the new age. Let us walk them, one by one, in the order the light takes them. First comes Airport Mesa, odd name for a sacred site, and the oddness is part of what makes it instructive. Long before it was a vortex, the flat top of this mesa, rising west of town, was exactly what its name says, an airport. A small, windswept airstrip carved into the red stone, where early aviators landed their little planes in the desert dust, gambling their wheels against the thermals and the downslope winds. If you stand there today, at the overlook where the tourists gather in the late afternoon, you can see why they chose it. The mesa commands the whole valley. To one side, the town of Sedona spreads out in its bowl of stone. To the other, the red country rolls away toward the horizon, tower after tower, spire after spire, each one catching the failing light in a different shade of flame. It is the highest of the 4 sites, the most exposed, the one where the sky feels enormous and the wind speaks in a voice you can feel in your chest. Believers will tell you that Airport Mesa is the upward vortex, the masculine passage, the place of ascent and clarity. They will tell you to stand at the energy point near the overlook and raise your hands and feel the current coming up through the soles of your feet and out through your crown. Many of them will tell you, in the same quiet voice, that this is the place where they understood something about their lives that they had been avoiding for years. The skeptic will tell you that a high exposed mesa at sunset, with the entire valley spread below like a map of possibility, produces that feeling in any human nervous system capable of wonder. And both of them, if they are honest, will tell you that standing there is not like standing anywhere else in the valley, because the perspective is different. Airport Mesa does not give you the rocks. It gives you the pattern. It gives you the whole design at once. The great architecture of the earth laid out in red and gold, and there is a reason the word that people use there over and over is clarity. Second comes Cathedral Rock. You know it even if you have never been here. It is the most photographed rock formation in Arizona, the icon of the region, the image that appears on more postcards and more computer desktops and more meditation guides than any other stone in the Southwest. It rises south of town, a great red spire complex that looks, from certain angles, like the towers of a Gothic church built by a civilization that worked in light instead of stone, and it gives its shape to the most famous view in the valley. The formation reflected in the still water of Red Rock Crossing on Oak Creek doubled the sky and the earth exchanging a single image. Cathedral Rock, believers say, is the inflow vortex, the feminine passage, the place of deep feeling and surrender. They will tell you that it draws you in rather than lifting you up, that people come here to release things, to weep, to let go of what they have been carrying. They will tell you that the energies of the site are most powerful at the base of the rock and at the saddle between the spires, that the climb is steep, but the reward is a view through the veil itself. And there is something undeniably true in all of it, even to the most hardened skeptic. There is no view in the valley that draws the eye and stills the breath the way this one does. It is not just beautiful, it is moving. It lands in the chest before the mind can organize it into an opinion. People stand at Red Rock Crossing and fall silent, and the silence is not empty. The silence is full. Maybe it is because the rock looks like what it is named for, a cathedral. And a cathedral is a machine for making a particular kind of feeling, the feeling of smallness, of awe, of being in the presence of something that will outlast you, and yet somehow includes you. The ancient builders of Europe built their cathedrals of stone and glass and pointed arches, engineering the light to fall in certain ways, engineering the sound to rise. Here, nature did the same work without an architect. The spires rise. The light falls. The creek runs below, reflecting, doubling, as if the rock and its image were in conversation. If you want to understand the vortex phenomenon, stand here at dusk for 20 minutes and watch what happens to the people who arrive. The tour groups go quiet, the phones go down, the stone does the rest. Third is Bell Rock, the famous one. The one on the bumper stickers call it by its silhouette. A bell, a great rounded dome of red sandstone set in the desert south of town, so distinctive that the eye finds it from miles away and the memory keeps it. The believers will tell you that Bell Rock is the strongest of the vortex sites, the most intense, the one where the energy is most easily felt by the most people. They will tell you that its energy is balanced, neither inhaling nor exhaling, a place of rest and restoration, the safest of the sites for those who are sensitive. They will tell you that it is the best place to begin, and it is certainly the most visited, the most accessible, the most trailed. Thousands of people a day in the high season walk the easy loop at its base, sit on the flat rocks, take their photographs, and lie back against the warm stone, and many of them report, with a kind of amazed embarrassment, that they felt something they did not expect. A heaviness lifting, a quietness descending, the noise of the interior voice, the constant commentator, suddenly lowered to a whisper. At the base of Bell Rock, tumbled boulders form a kind of natural amphitheater, and if you sit there in the middle of the day with the rock above you and the desert around you, you will hear something that the brochures do not mention. Silence so complete that it has texture, the wind over the stone, the far cry of a bird, the sound of your own breathing uncommonly loud. It is not an energy field, the skeptics say. It is a lack of noise. It is the first silence many people have experienced in years, the first hour without a notification, without a screen, without a schedule, and the nervous system, starved of silence, drinks it like water. Maybe the skeptics are right, but try telling that to the woman crying quietly on the flat rock with her eyes closed, and see if your explanation does the same work. The fourth is Boynton Canyon, and this is the one the guides save for last. West of town lies Boynton Canyon, a long, deep canyon cutting back into the red country, whose walls rise for 600 feet in great terraced cliffs of stone and juniper. It is the most remote of the four, the least built around, the one where the trail follows the canyon floor beneath walls that seem to lean inward, watching. The believers will tell you that Boynton Canyon is the most powerful and the most complex of the vortexes, that it combines energies, that it is the place where the veil is thinnest of all, that it has been a ceremonial site for the indigenous peoples of this region since long before any of their names were written down. And they are right about at least one thing, and it is the thing that matters. The canyon was sacred, is sacred, to the peoples who lived here, the Sinagua, and after them the Yavapai and the Apache, who still consider this land their own. The evidence is in the canyon walls themselves. Cliff dwellings, tucked into the alcoves, some of them nearly complete, walls of mud and stone still standing after 700 years against the wind. Rock art scratched and painted into the smooth faces, spirals and figures and symbols that no living person can fully translate. The people who made those marks were not tourists. They were not seeking an experience. They were living here every day, in relationship, in reciprocity, in a world where the boundary between the human and the sacred was not a line but a circle. At the end of the trail in Boynton Canyon, there is a place where the walls open out, and the canyon floor rises to meet an ancient cliff dwelling, and many people who reach it, even people who came only for the hike, people who do not believe in anything, report the same thing in almost the same words. A sense of being watched, a sense of being welcomed, a sense of having arrived somewhere they had been looking for without knowing the address. They do not know what to call it. They call it energy. They call it presence. They call it the same thing the old ones called it, in languages that have not been spoken in this canyon for 100 years, though the words are lost and only the feeling remains. Guides tell a story about Boynton Canyon, and whether it is true in the way a news report is true, or true in the way a myth is true, it belongs here. The story says that a developer once planned to build homes in the upper canyon, above the cliff dwellings, and that Yavapai Apache elders came to oppose the development, and that the developer went ahead anyway, and that the construction kept going wrong in ways that could not be accounted for. Machinery failing, surveys misfiring, the land itself refusing. And the story says that eventually, the developer sat down with the elders, and the elders explained that the canyon was not empty, that the souls of their ancestors were still there, that the canyon was a place where the veil is thin in the literal sense, the membrane between the living and the dead, between the seen and the unseen, and that building homes there would be like building a house on a grave, except the grave holds a whole people. And whatever you make of the story, one thing about it is verifiably true. The Upper Canyon was never built. Today, the land has been traded back to the Yavapai Apache Nation. Several thousand acres have been returned to the people who considered it sacred, and the canyon at its upper end remains wild. Whether that happened because of an energy field or because of a court case and a land exchange and decades of patient advocacy, the result is the same. The veil, however you define it, was honored. 4 stones, 4 names, 1 feeling. And here is the strange arithmetic that the whole phenomenon reduces to. Millions of visitors across decades, at sites scattered over hundreds of square miles, all reporting experiences that cluster around the same small set of words: clarity, release, peace, connection. The skeptics can explain each individual report away. What they cannot explain away is the convergence. The same place, visited by people of every culture and every belief and every prior expectation, producing the same reported change in the same proportions, year after year, like a repeatable experiment performed by the most unregulated laboratory in the world. If that is suggestion, then suggestion is the most powerful force on Earth, and the distinction between suggestion and energy stops mattering, because both of them are producing real changes in real nervous systems, real stories, real lives. The 4 stones are patient. That is the phrase. They have waited 400 million years. They can wait for you, but the valley has more to offer than the 4. It has the 40. It has the unnamed places, the ones the maps do not mark, the ones you find by accident on a trail you chose for the wrong reason, the ones that stop you dead in the middle of nowhere with a feeling you cannot justify. It has the canyon bottoms where the light falls green through the cottonwoods, and the high mesas where the world opens out to the sky, and the quiet places, the places without parking lots, where the only sound is the wind, and the only witness is the geologic deep time that made this country and is still making it, grain by grain, patient as always, and whether you feel nothing at any of them or feel everything at all of them, the rocks will not mind. They do not need your belief. They are not performing. They are just standing there, red and enormous and utterly indifferent to the commerce of the soul that has grown up at their feet, which means they are the most honest thing in this valley and the most mysterious. We will come back down to the town soon, to the money and the meaning and the question of whether the sacred can survive being sold. But first, linger with me a little longer in the particular quality of what the visitors describe, because it is the heart of the whole matter, and it deserves to be looked at in the open, slowly, the way you would look at a stone you have carried home from a place you loved. We have looked at the stones. Now we must look at what happens inside the people who stand before them, because that is where the phenomenon has always actually lived. The stones are the stage. The human nervous system is the play. One request, before we go further into that strange interior country, the same as always, because this is the part of the night when the world is quietest and I want to know I am not alone in it. Tell me where you are right now and what time it is. The city, the hour, the reason you are awake. I read the comments, every single one, And there is a particular sweetness in seeing the same names appear, night after night, from the same cities, as if we were all gathering in one enormous room that spans the globe. And if this channel has become a kind of home for you, a quiet place to land when the day has been too loud, consider subscribing. It costs nothing. It is the only thing that keeps this voice alive, and it means that on the nights when you need a long road and a gentle guide, I will be here. Now, let us go inside the machine. The first thing science noticed about the vortex experience is that it is real in its effects. Whatever the source, whatever the mechanism, whatever the skeptics say about the ground, the experience itself is reproducible. The same place, the same reports, the same words, decade after decade, from visitors who arrive with every possible set of prior beliefs. The believers feel the energy. The skeptics feel the silence. Both of them describe a change, a quieting, a loosening, a widening. Something in the nervous system opens the way a fist opens, slowly when it has been clenched for years. Psychologists have a name for the machinery that produces this, and the name is expectancy. Here is what the research says, and it is more interesting than either side wants you to know. A placebo, a treatment with no active ingredient, produces real physiological effects, real changes in pain, in mood, in digestion, in immune response, in the release of actual chemicals in the actual brain. This is not imagination in the dismissive sense. This is the mind and body as a single system, communicating in molecules. And the strangest finding of the modern research is this: placebos work even when the patient knows they are placebos. In a famous series of studies, patients were given pills that were labeled honestly, the researchers saying, "This is a sugar pill. It has no medicine in it, but it is known to produce relief if you believe it will." And the patients, knowing full well the pill was inert, improved anyway, consistently, significantly. The ritual of the treatment, the intention, the opened state of expectation was itself the medicine. They have a name for this now. They call it the open-label placebo effect. The sugar pill with the honesty label still performs, which means the mechanism is not deception. The mechanism is something in the relationship between a person, a ritual, and a hope. Now take that finding and walk it out to the Red Rocks. Someone arrives in Sedona having heard for years that this is a place where the veil is thin. They have driven for hours or flown for days. They have checked into a hotel with a view of the spires. They have bought the map or taken the tour, or simply been told by every other human being in the valley, in every tone from commercial to reverent, that something happens here. Their expectation is not vague, it is as prepared as a stage. And then they stand at the base of Cathedral Rock at dusk, in the enormous silence, in the light that turns the stone to embers, and their nervous system, primed for transformation and starved of silence for years, does exactly what it is primed to do. It opens. The tears come. The clarity comes. The sense of being held comes. It is not a lie and it is not a delusion. It is the most reliable machinery in the human body. The machinery by which a person in the right place, at the right time, in the right state, becomes available to their own depths. The vortex is real the way a door is real. The energy it is said to emit is in the person who walks through, and the person who walks through is changed. Not by magic. By the oldest magic there is, which is no magic at all. The capacity of a living creature to be moved by meaning. This is why the reports converge on the same small set of words, from Buenos Aires and Berlin and Osaka and Ohio. Clarity, release, peace, connection. Not because they all feel an identical field, but because they all arrive with the identical human hunger, and the same door opens for them, and the room behind the door is the same room. The room of the self, met at last, in silence, at scale. Anthropologists who study pilgrimage have understood this for a century, and they have a name for it too. They call it liminality, the threshold state. In every culture, the pilgrimage works the same way. You leave your ordinary world, you travel, you arrive changed by the traveling itself. You stand in a place that is marked as different, set apart, holy, and the marking, the very fact that everyone agrees this is a special place, that generation after generation has agreed, that the agreement itself is a kind of architecture, allows you to step out of your ordinary self the way you step out of a coat. The threshold is real because the community says it is real. The doorway is held open by the weight of all the people who have walked through it before you, believing. You are not alone in the doorway. You are standing in a line that stretches back, through the cliff dwellers and the spiral carvers, and forward into all the sleepers, all over the world who will come after you. That is what a sacred site is. That is what one is for. So when the skeptic says there is no energy at Bell Rock, the honest answer is correct. And when they say it is all in your head, the honest answer is yes. And both answers are the beginning of the wonder, not the end of it. Because your head, your mind, your nervous system, your bottomless capacity to be changed by meaning is the most powerful instrument on the planet. It is the instrument that toppled empires and painted the Sistine Chapel and invented the wheel and the quarantine and the lullaby. To say the vortex is in your head is like saying the sunrise is in your eye. Technically true, and it misses the entire point, which is that you came to the Red Rocks to meet something that you were carrying all along, and you needed a great red door to be able to meet it. There is one more thread to pull here, and it is the thread that runs underneath the whole industrial psychology of the modern world. The reason the doorway works so powerfully on so many people, the reason people weep at the base of Bell Rock who never weep anywhere else, is that the modern human being is profoundly starved of the conditions the doorway requires. A-way, silence, scale, stillness, the sensation of being small in something vast. Think about a week of an ordinary modern life. The rooms are small and the ceilings are low. The screens are bright and the feeds are endless. The schedule is full and the body is still. You can go months, years, without standing somewhere that makes you feel tiny in a good way. The research on awe says the body misses it like a vitamin. Regular awe experiences reduce stress hormones, lower inflammation, increase generosity, slow the subjective experience of time, and measurably improve mood for weeks afterward. The need is real, the deficit is real, and the marketplace of the modern world has noticed, which is why there is an entire industry now selling the doorway, the retreat, the workshop, the pilgrimage package, the ticket to stand in the silence for an hour and feel again that you are part of something larger than the next notification. Surprising generosity sits at the heart of the Sedona phenomenon. Whatever you believe about the energy, the place is performing a service that genuine medicine is only beginning to understand. It is taking tired, depleted, disconnected nervous systems and giving them what they are starved of. It is mass-producing awe in the most awe-efficient landscape in North America. The believers call it a vortex. The scientists call it a natural laboratory of peak experience. The visitors call it the best week of their lives. They are all describing the same event. From 3 different seats in the same enormous room, the experience is real. That much is settled. What the experience is for, what it means, whether it can survive being sold, those are the questions of the next chapter, and they are harder than the science. Because Sedona is not only a doorway, it is also a business. It is the most successful business ever built on the oldest longing there is, and the longing does not care that it is being sold. The longing just keeps coming, in rental cars, in tour buses, in the quiet shapes of people standing very still on flat rocks with their eyes closed. We will go down into the town now, but keep the doorway in your mind. Keep the image of the handprint on the canyon wall, because the town and the handprint are about to enter the same frame, and what happens when a sacred site meets a cash register is one of the strangest stories on the continent, and the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. Come down from the rocks now and walk the streets of the town and look at what a naming ceremony looks like when it happens in a free market. Not us first. The word is everywhere. It is not a word anymore. It is a brand. It is on the sign above the Vortex Tours office, and the name of the Vortex Juice Bar, and the title of the Vortex Meditation Workshop, and the tagline of the Vortex Spa Package. It is on t-shirts and fridge magnets, and the little cards tucked into the windshield wipers of every rental car in the parking lot. It is printed on maps that cost $12 and are, in a very real sense, the most successful map of a spiritual geography ever sold, because they sell the geography and the spirituality in a single laminated fold. The word has been pumped through so many commercial mouths that it has gone slightly hollow, the way a word does when it is overused, and you can hear the hollowness in the tour guide's voice when they say it for the 40th time that day. And you can also hear the hollowness not mattering at all, because the valley is still doing the thing it has always done. Behind the signs and behind the shops, patient, indifferent, glowing, numbers deliver the first surprise. This town, this small bowl of red stone with its 10,000 permanent residents, receives millions of visitors every year. By many estimates, more visitors per resident than almost any other place in the country. It is not an exaggeration to say that the spiritual economy is the economy. The Vortex is not a sideshow in Sedona. The Vortex is the main tent. The jeep tours, the guided meditations, the crystal shops, the healing centers, the spas with their version of the Vortex in the name of a massage, the galleries selling paintings of the rocks in every palette the sunset offers, the real estate agents selling homes with a view of the rocks and a mention of the energy in the listing. All of it runs on the same engine. The unquenchable human wish to stand for a moment inside something vast and feel it respond. And here is the strange second surprise. The hollowness of the commerce does not seem to cancel the depth of the experience. People who come for the $12 map and the Feng Shui consultation and the Vortex certified tour still stand at the base of Cathedral Rock at dusk and still weep. The industry can be cynical. The place cannot. It is as if the valley has a kind of immune system that keeps the sacred alive no matter how much signage accumulates at its feet. The tourists come for the brand and are ambushed by the real thing. They come expecting the souvenir and receive the silence. That is the pattern the researchers find, over and over, in the letters and the comments and the interviews. Almost nobody reports being disappointed. The visitors who arrive mocking the whole phenomenon often leave with the most defenseless expressions, rubbing their arms, unable to explain, saying the same strange sentence. Something happened. I don't know what it was, but something happened. Long before the Vortex, the town had a relationship with this kind of transaction, and that history is older than the word. Sedona was discovered by the American imagination long before the psychics arrived. In the 1950s, Hollywood found the Red Rocks, and the Red Rocks found a second life as the backdrop of the American West. Westerns were shot among these towers and mesas, cowboy epics and cavalry adventures, the great outdoor dream factory of the post-war era, and the town became a small star of the screen before it became a star of the spirit. Actors came, directors came. The landscape that the Sinagua had read as a text of sacred meaning was read, for a generation, as a text of heroic meaning, the rugged backdrop of the national myth. And then the movies moved on, the way the movies always move on, leaving the town with its beauty and its silence and its need for a new story to tell about itself. The story arrived in the 80s with the word. And if you want to understand the whole arc of what happened next, the transformation of a quiet arts colony into the spiritual tourism capital of America, you have to understand that the town did not invent the conversion. The conversion was already underway inside the visitors. The word simply let them name what they had come for. And once they could name it, they could buy it. And once they could buy it, someone would sell it. That is the machine. That is the whole of it. The longing was already there, enormous as the sky. The commerce simply moved in to serve it, the way a market town appears at the crossroads, inevitable as weather. Now we come to the uncomfortable question, the one the brochures never ask, and the one the people who live here argue about in the privacy of their kitchens. Could you sell the sacred, and if you did you destroy it? The question is not new. It is as old as the first temple gift shop. Every sacred site on earth has had to face it. The cathedral with the admissions desk, the monastery with the gift shop, the holy mountain with the cable car. The scholars of religion have a phrase for the process, and the phrase is commodification, and the argument against it goes like this. When the mystery is packaged, it is consumed differently. When the journey is bought, it is shallower. When the wonder is scheduled, it is domesticated. The ticket taker at the door of the sanctuary changes everyone's relationship to what is inside, including the believers. There is a version of this argument that is true, and everyone who has ever stood in a gift shop where the sacred item has a price tag knows the truth of it. The energy of the room changes. The room becomes a product. The infinite becomes inventory. But there is another side, and the town itself is the evidence for it. The door has not closed. The experience has not stopped. The millions who come in their rental cars and their guided tours are not all consuming shallowly. The researchers who interview them are consistently surprised by the depth. People who came as tourists and left as pilgrims, People who came to laugh at the energy and stayed an extra week, people who came for the Instagram photograph and found that the photograph was the least of it. The commerce in this valley seems to function less like a gate and more like a porch, a place to wait before you step in. It serves the sacred without understanding it. It points at the thing it cannot sell, the way a sign points at the moon while taking your money for the parking. Deeper still lies a truth underneath the economy, one that the harshest skeptic and the most devoted believer can share. The commerce of Sedona is a commerce of longing, and longing is not produced by advertising. Advertising can direct it, shape it, name it, and charge it admission. But the longing itself is native to the human animal. The wish to be small in something vast and safe in it. The wish to belong to a story larger than the individual. The wish, in the oldest formulation in the world, to come home. The town sells tickets to all three of those wishes, and the wishes were there before the town was, and they will be there after the town is gone, which is the reason the business model is so durable, and the reason it survives the cynicism that inevitably gathers around anything that profits from wonder. Talk to the people who live here, and you get the full spectrum. There are the old timers who remember when the red rocks were just rocks and the town was just a town, and who mourn the crowds the way you mourn a childhood street. There are the artists who came for the light and stay for the light, who paint the rocks and quietly refuse the Vortex pamphlets. There are the practitioners, sincere and devoted, who believe with their whole hearts that this valley is a place of genuine healing and who have built their lives on the conviction. There are the teenagers working the crystal shops who have heard the word vortex so many times that it has become white noise, and who will tell you, if you ask them directly, that they have never felt anything unusual and that the customers seem to feel it plenty. And there are the retired people, the snowbirds, the seekers, the ones who came for a weekend 10 years ago and never left, who will tell you, often with tears in their eyes, that this place saved them, that they don't know what it is, that they don't care what it is, that whatever it is why they are still alive. Which of these is the real Sedona? All of them. The town is a palimpsest now, like the canyon walls. Layer over layer, the sacred and the commercial and the ordinary, the handprint and the price tag, the spiral and the spiral pattern mandala for sale on Etsy. The layers do not cancel each other, they coexist. And the coexistence is not a contradiction. It is the actual texture of how the sacred survives in the modern world. Not in a sealed temple, but in the messy middle, in the gift shop and the silence, in the tour bus and the trail, in the $12 map that leads, if you let it, to the place where the map stops working and the thing itself begins. Ask the town what it asks of everyone who visits, whether they know it or not. It is the same question every sacred site has asked since the first pilgrim crested the first pass and saw the holy mountain below. What did you come here to get? And then the harder follow-up, one the rocks themselves seem to ask in the late light. What are you willing to give for it? The pilgrims of the old world brought offerings and walked barefoot. The pilgrims of the new world bring credit cards and drive jeeps. But the question is the same, and the answer is the same, and the answer is almost never what the visitors thought it was when they bought the ticket. The industry cannot answer the question. It can only sell the approach. And the approach, for millions of people a year, is working. Which brings us at last to the skeptic, the forgotten character in every room of this story, the one who has been standing at the back of the canyon the whole time, arms crossed, watching the tears and the tingling and the $12 maps with the same patient expression the rocks have. The skeptic deserves a fair hearing. The skeptic has earned it. And the skeptic, when you finally sit down and listen to the whole argument, is going to tell you something that turns out to be more interesting than anyone expected. Before we go any further into the last valley of this walk, let me pause and make the same request I always make because we are approaching the deepest part of the night and I want to feel the shape of the room I am speaking into. In the comments, tell me where you are right now and what time it is, the city, the hour, the thing you are thinking about that you have not said out loud. I read them all, and there is something holy in the way the names and the cities accumulate. Osaka, Berlin, Toronto, Austin, a map of the world drawn in all-nighter insomniacs, all of us lying in the dark together, listening to the same stones breathe. And if this channel has become a place you return to, consider subscribing so that on the nights when you need a quiet voice and a long road, you will always know where to find one. Now, let us give the skeptic their hour at last. The skeptic has been standing at the back of the canyon the whole time, arms crossed, watching the tears and the tingling and the $12 maps with the same patient expression the rocks have. And the skeptic, when you finally sit down and listen, does not say what you think they will say. Listen first to the skeptic. I am not here to ruin it for you. Every trail in this valley has been walked alone, at every hour, in every season. The places without parking lots, the places the maps do not mark. Cathedral Rock at dawn when there was nobody else for a mile. Boynton Canyon in the rain. Bell Rock in the dark. And the truth is this: no field, no force, no energy came up through the soles of my feet at any of them. Not once. I felt the wind. I felt the silence. I felt the beauty. And the beauty is real. And the silence is real. And the wind is real. And I suspect that is the whole of it. This is the strange thing, though. When the skeptic says this, they are not diminishing the experience. They are describing it in their own language, from their own seat in the room. The silence and the beauty and the wind, these are not lesser things. They are enormous things. They are the very things the weary human nervous system is starving for. The skeptic's explanation of the vortex is not a refutation of the testimonies. It is the testimonies, translated into the dialect of the literal. Feel nothing but silence, and you have felt the same thing the believers felt, named in a different tongue. The believers hear the silence and call it energy. The skeptic hears the silence and calls it silence. Both are standing in the same silence. Both are telling the truth. Here is what the skeptic knows, and it is worth more than any instrument reading. The history of the human race is a history of explaining the sacred in the language of the age. The ancient ones saw spirits in the storms and gods in the mountains and messages in the flights of birds, and the explanations were real to them, were the homes of their meaning. Then came the age of the instrument, and the instrument found no spirits, no gods, no messages, no field at Bell Rock, no difference at all between the ground at the vortex and the ground at the parking lot. And the temptation in every age is to conclude that because the explanation was wrong, the experience was nothing. The skeptic knows better. The skeptic has walked enough of the human story to know that the experiences are the constant and the explanations are the weather. The weather changes. The experiences remain. Think of it this way. For 10,000 years, human beings have sat around fires, and the fires have produced the same things always: warmth, light, safety, story, sleep. And the explanations of the fire have changed completely across the ages. The fire is a god. The fire is the breath of the underworld. The fire is phlogiston. The fire is oxidation. The fire is plasma. Every explanation has been superseded. Every explanation has been wrong, in the end, in its details. And the fire has never stopped being what it is: the oldest comfort, the first public square, the place where the dark becomes bearable. The skeptic says, the vortex is a fire. The name is an explanation of the age. The fire is real. The warmth is real, the gathering is real, and the explanation, like all explanations, will be superseded by the next one, and the fire will still be burning, and the next age will give it a new name, and the people will still come. The critic's deepest complaint about Sedona, the one underneath the one about the science, is not that the phenomenon is false. It is that the phenomenon has been vulgarized, that the deepest thing the human animal knows has been turned into a product, that the mystery has been laminated and priced and sold, that the door to the numinous now requires a ticket. And the skeptic is not wrong about the vulgarization. It is visible everywhere. The word on the t-shirt, the energy on the schedule, the enlightenment at the day rate. But vulgarization is not the same as destruction, and the skeptic, if they are honest, has seen the evidence on both sides. They have seen the tourist who came for the souvenir and stayed for the silence. They have seen the commerce fail over and over to contain the experience it sells. They have seen the product point past itself, the way good maps always point past themselves, toward the territory they cannot contain. The map is for sale. The territory is not. The territory was never for sale. The territory does not know it is for sale. The territory is just red rock and silence and wind and time, and it gives itself away for nothing to anyone who stands still long enough to receive it, whether they bought the map or not. Second comes a complaint that is harder, and it deserves to be honored. The skeptic says, The invention of the vortex name took something real from the people who were here first. The sacred sites were not empty when the word arrived. The Yavapai and the Apache were still here in memory and in presence, their ancestors buried in the canyon floors, their ceremonies tied to the very rocks that the new industry began to tour and to sell. The New Age inherited the sites the way a later tenant inherits a furnished house, and it did not always ask whose furniture it was, whose ancestors, whose ceremony, whose land. The word vortex, for all its beauty, arrived on top of names and stories that had been forcibly silenced, and it spoke over them, and the skeptic is right to notice this, and the honest participant in this phenomenon must notice it too. The older peoples of this valley, and their descendants today, had their own words for what the rocks meant, and those words were not for sale. The land was taken, the word was added, and the healing, whatever it is incomplete until that specific wound is named, but here is the grace that the skeptic, in the end, is willing to offer. The wound is not the whole story. The descendants of the first peoples are still here, and the land is beginning to come home to them. The Yavapai Apache Nation has fought for decades to reclaim what was taken, and there have been victories, land exchanges, and returns that put several thousand acres back into the hands of the people who considered them sacred, so that the upper Boynton Canyon, where the cliff dwellings stand, is returning to the care of the descendants of the people who built them. The ceremony was not erased entirely. The memory was not erased entirely. And the visitors who come now, if they are taught to listen, are being told a fuller story than the visitors of the 80s were told. The story that includes the handprints, the evictions, the boarding schools, the return, the refusal of the Yavapai and the Apache to be dissolved into a footnote of the New Age. The skeptic's complaint, stated whole, is not that the sacred was invented. It is that the sacred was overwritten, and the correction is not to stop coming. The correction is to come with more awareness and to leave more respect and to hear the name the place had before the name it has now. So what is the skeptic's final position after all this walking, all this listening? It is this. The skeptic does not need the vortex to be real in the ground because the skeptic has something better. The knowledge that the wonder is real in the people and the people are the point. The energy field is not in the rock. The energy field is in the encounter between a vast and ancient and unspeakably beautiful thing and a small and temporary and unspeakably longing human being. That encounter is measurable, reproducible, ancient, and universal. It is the encounter the cliff dwellers arranged their rooms to face. It is the encounter the spiral carvers stepped toward with their hands. It is the encounter the pilgrims of every tradition have walked toward since the first of them left the first village. And it does not matter whether you call it the energy of the earth or the engineering of awe, because the doorway opens either way, and the person who walks through it is changed either way, and the change is the phenomenon. The believer and the skeptic, standing together at sunset on the flat rock at the saddle of Cathedral Rock, with the valley burning below them and the sky going violet above them, are not enemies. They are two halves of the same human response to vastness. The half that says it is outside me and the half that says it is inside me. And the answer, the one the rocks themselves have been offering for 400 million years, is that it is both, that the inside and the outside are not separated the way the modern world has taught us to believe, that the boundary between the self and the stone is the thinnest veil in this whole valley, thinner than any veil the spiritual literature ever named. When you stand at the base of Bell Rock and feel the silence move through you, you are not touching an energy field. You are touching the oldest fact there is, that you and the world are one continuous event, the same chemistry, the same motion, the same brief flare in the long dark, and the rock, patient and red, has been waiting all along to show you that you were never separate from it. That is the veil, and the veil is the last thing on this walk. Let us go to it now. Not upward, into the rocks, but inward, into the reason the rocks work at all. We have walked through the geology and the people, the word and the wonder, the money and the meaning, the skeptic and the silence. One thread remains, one secret. The secret underneath every other secret in this valley, the one the sleepers are already beginning to dream. Ahead lies the end of the walk, and with it at last, the word that started all the others. The veil, the thin place. The membrane between this world and the other, stretched thin as light between the red cliffs. Irish pilgrims had a phrase for the kind of landscape Sedona is said to be. They called it a thin place, a spot where the distance between heaven and earth narrows, where you can stand with one foot in each world. The Irish kept lists of these places, and pilgrims walked to them for centuries. And the language they used is almost exactly the language the visitors use here, arriving from Dublin and Galway and Cork on the Vortex tours. Thin. The veil is thin, the membrane is thin. Again and again, across cultures and centuries and continents, the same image. The other world is not far away. It is not up beyond the sky, unreachable. It is here beside you, separated from you only by a membrane of ordinary perception, and in certain places, at certain times, in certain states, the membrane thins until you can almost see through it. Ancient as the image is, it is also, if you will forgive the term, a perfect physical description of what this valley actually does to the senses. Stand at the top of Airport Mesa in the evening and watch what happens to the world. The shadows lengthen, the air cools. The red of the cliffs deepens and then begins to glow, as if lit from inside, as if the stone had been hiding a furnace all day, and the dusk were the hour of its confession. The last light moves up the towers, spire by spire, leaving them dim, and the sky goes through its enormous sequence: gold, apricot, rose, violet, indigo, black, stars. The effect is not decoration, it is disorientation, gently done. The world you drove into, the ordinary world of parking lots and maps and plans, has been slowly replaced in front of you by a world that does not care about your plans. The veil between the ordinary and the overwhelming has been thinned by light, by silence, by scale. You have been moved, without noticing, from the world of the schedule into the world of the stones. That, and not any geological field, is the machinery of every thin place on Earth. The cathedrals thin the veil with height and stained glass, and the smell of old stone and candle wax, engineering the conditions under which the ordinary self loosens its grip. The temples of the East thinned it with incense and repetition, and the long discipline of the breath. The desert thinned it with emptiness, with the absence of everything the mind usually uses to distract itself. And this valley thins it with all of it at once, with beauty that exceeds the frame of a photograph, with silence that has texture, with time made visible in the striations of the cliffs, with the sense, which every visitor reports sooner or later, that the place existed before you and will exist after you, and that your presence in it is both insignificant and utterly welcome. Here is the secret underneath all the others, and it is the one the sleepers are dreaming now, the one I have been walking you toward through the loose threads since the first sentence. No veil hangs between the worlds here. The veil hangs between you and your own depths. Why can the red rocks move you, bring the tears up without warning, still the commentator in your head for the first time in months? Not because they are portals to another dimension. It is that they are the conditions under which you can finally hear yourself. The interior world, the one you carry everywhere, the one that is always talking, always planning, always worrying, always scrolling through the next thing, that world is always there, behind the ordinary membrane of your attention, and the modern life keeps the membrane stretched so thin with stimulation that you cannot hear what is behind it. The desert stills the membrane. The silence drops the noise floor. The vastness recalibrates the self, and in the recalibration, in the sudden quiet, you hear it at last. The deeper voice, the older self, the one that was there before the schedules, the self that knows what it wants and what it has lost and what it came here to find. The vortex is not an energy field in the ground. The vortex is the name for what happens when the noise stops long enough for the deeper self to be heard. And the deeper self, when it is heard, is enormous. It contains the sorrows and the joys and the connection to everything that lives and has lived. It is, in the oldest formulation, all of us, all related, all part of the same story. That is what the handprint on the canyon wall was reaching toward. That is what the pilgrim has always been walking toward, through every thin place on Earth. That is what the $12 map, at its best, is: a map of not the rocks, but the inside of you. Do not be troubled if you have drifted off somewhere along the walk, if the chapters have blurred together and the names have dissolved, and you are not certain anymore where the geology ended and the psychology began. That blending is the point. That is what a long, slow walk through a mystery is for. To loosen the categories, to soften the edges, to let the story work on you the way the water works on the stone, patient, persistent, carving. You came here with questions about a small town in the desert, and you will leave, if you leave at all, with a question about yourself, which is the only question any thin place has ever really been for. So let us gather up the threads we pulled and see what they make when they are braided together. We know that the rocks are old beyond telling, 400 million years of sea and desert and deep time, the anatomy of the earth exposed. We know that the people who lived here first read the land as a living text, carved their spirals and their handprints into its walls, oriented their rooms and their graves and their ceremonies toward its peaks, and that their knowledge was largely silenced, and that the silence was a wound, and that the wound is still part of what the visitors walk through today, whether they know it or not. We know that the word vortex was born not in the ancient world, but in the 1980s, in the meeting of an engineer and a channeler, in a cultural moment that was starving for the sacred, and that the word worked, that it named a real hunger and opened a real door, and that the door has been walked through since the harmonic convergence of 1987 by millions. We know that no instrument has ever measured the field, and that the field is real anyway, because the field is in the human nervous system, and the human nervous system is the most sensitive instrument at any sacred site on earth. We know that the commerce of the valley cannot destroy the mystery, only point at it, because the mystery is not in the product, it is in the encounter. And we know that the skeptic and the believer, standing together in the same silence, are both telling the truth, because the silence is both things. The absence of noise and the presence of everything. The deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. And the digging is not finished. That is the other thing the walk has taught us. The story is not closed. Every year, the archaeologists find something new in these cliffs, a site, a style, a signature of the old ones that shifts the picture. Every year, the anthropologists and the psychologists learn something new about awe and silence and the machinery of transformation. Every year, the descendants of the first peoples reclaim territory and language and ceremony, and the story of this valley grows more complete, more honest, more healing. The story is not finished. The digging continues. There are spirals yet uncarved, rooms yet unopened, questions yet unasked, and the red rocks stand over all of it, patient, waiting, unchanged, the way they waited for the first people and the way they will wait for the last. And now, at the end of the walk, we come back to where we began. We began with something waiting under the red rocks. We began with the feeling that something is alive in this stone. We have walked through the sea and the sandstone, the cliff dwellers and the cowboys, the engineer and the channeler, the four stones and the 40, the map and the territory, the silence and the science, and we have found, in the end, the thing we set out to find, which is not an energy field and not a secret government and not a hidden chamber under the chapel. It is simpler and stranger and older than any of those. What is really hidden in the desert? A doorway, held open by beauty and silence and deep time. That doorway waits for you to walk through it into the only room that has ever mattered, the room where you meet yourself at last, at scale, in stillness. The room where the small self loosens its grip. The room where the world becomes, for one long breath, one continuous event, and you are part of the event, the way the red rock is part of it, and the stars are part of it, and the generations before and after are part of it. All related, all part of the same story, all worth paying attention to, all worth remembering. Modern, the red rocks wait. Constant, the stars hold their places. The story continues, and you, lying in your bed on your small patch of the ancient continent, in whatever city you left in the comments, under whatever sky is dark over your head at this hour, are part of it too. Close your eyes now, because you were never separate. The veil was only ever between you and the knowledge of how much you belong. Let the walk dissolve, the names go, the dates, the arguments, the maps. What will remain, when the words are gone, is the image. The red towers glowing at dusk, the spiral carved by a hand that has been dust for 700 years, the silence with texture, the wind, the stars, the sense of being small in something vast and safe in the smallness, the way a child is safe in the dark when there is someone in the next room, breathing is the last thing, and the oldest prayer. In through the nose, deep, and out through the mouth, slow, the way the water goes down, Oak Creek, Patient, persistent, carving. You are not falling asleep, you are being carved, gently, by a force 100 million years older than any name for it. And when you wake in the morning in the ordinary world, with the schedule and the screens, and the next thing, something will remain of tonight, something small and red and patient waiting inside you, like an ember waiting to be found again. Sleep well.